Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. We're all very happy to have you with us today. I am Det Arguego, Managing Director of Assessment Analytics, and I am pleased to welcome all of you to our second webinar for this year. Now, before we begin, may I request all of you to turn on your cameras so we can take a group photo before the actual session? We want to see your pretty and handsome faces before we begin. Okay, so this session is part of our series of 20 complimentary webinars. While I'm waiting for all of you to turn on your just to let you know that this is just the second out of a series of 20 complimentary webinars in celebration of our AI's 20th year. So I hope to see you all in the next sessions to come. And also, this session is being recorded and will be shared on our social media channels. So that's YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So follow us through the links that Ray will also be posting in the chat. Right. So thank you, Ray, for taking that photo, and thank you, everyone. So now today's topic is something that applies to all of us, regardless of where we are in our careers and even in our personal lives. As the workplace continues to evolve, expectations have also changed. It's no longer just about doing our jobs well. Professionals today are also expected to influence, build trust, and create meaningful impact. And that kind of influence doesn't just come from a job title. It also comes from the personal brand that we build. We're now very excited for today's session because this is something that we see every day in our work. Talent decisions, or even decisions in general, are no longer just about capability, but also about how individuals show up, influence, and create impact. And that's exactly what today's session, The Power of Personal Branding, is all about. To guide us through this conversation, it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Ms. Karen Espiritu. Karen is a leadership coach and training facilitator with over 15 years of experience helping individuals and organizations achieve personal excellence. Guided by her mission of developing people towards personal excellence, she has worked with diverse audiences both locally and internationally. A summa cum laude graduate of the Fashion Institute of Technology, she gained recognition in New York, where her personal branding workshop was awarded Most Outstanding Individual Development Program across New York State. She has held leadership roles across industries, including publishing, travel, and garment import, and previously served as curriculum director for John Robert Powers. Karen further honed her leadership expertise through studies at Harvard University and is today a culture invigoration consultant, a Lego Serious Play facilitator, Clifton Strengths coach, and international career coach, known for helping individuals build strong personal brands and create meaningful impact. With her strong background in personal branding and leadership development, we are very confident that today's session will be both insightful and practical. So, without further ado, Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you so much. And a happy Thursday to everybody. It is a privilege to be here and to be with you today as I talk about a topic that is very, very close to my heart, something that I've practiced, something that has helped me really be where I want to be in my career, and that is personal branding. So allow me to share my screen. And today we are going to talk about the power of personal branding. So before I begin getting into the meat of our discussion today and the sharing, I'd like to give you a quiz. Okay, so here are 5 different celebrities and leaders in their own industries. And what I'd like you to do is just quickly match what you believe is the brand of each of these celebrities. So first of all, everybody knows Steve Jobs. He is the founder of Apple. Tony Tan Katyong, of course, Jollibee. Mary Barra is the general manager of GM, Jaime Isabel de Ayala, and you have Gina Lopez. So all you have to do is in the chat box, match it. So example, if you feel Steve Jobs is the Echo Warrior, put there A1, okay, and then so on and so forth. So I'll give you Couple of minutes to do that. Please populate the group chat. Let's see how well you know their brands. Okay, we have one answer. Okay. Two answers there. Okay. We're seeing already a couple of answers there. We have full answers. Okay. Just a few more seconds. Let me give others a chance to be able to identify the brands of these celebrities, leaders. Okay, and time is up. So let's reveal the answers. Okay, so I believe a lot of you got it right. The ones that have answered on the chat box. So let's take a look. Yes, so Steve Jobs is the visionary innovator. Of course, Tony Tan Cationg is the pioneer of Filipino fast food. Mary Barra is known for the transformational leader because as a woman, she was the first woman to be the general manager of like a male-dominated industry. Ethical industrialist, of course, is Jaime Isabel de Ayala. And last but not the least, you have Gina Lopez, which is the eco warrior. So let's take a look at one of the examples here on how she was able to build her personal brand. Okay. So Gina Lopez is has been known as the eco warrior through, of course, what some of the things that she demonstrated consistently in her life. So the first one is, what were her characteristics? She was passionate, fearless, and purpose-driven. Okay. How did she behave both in public and in the private sector? She was a values-based activist. She led from the heart. Everybody knew that, how passionate she was when she was advocating for the Pasig River, right, for the environment. And she was also inspiring change through service and advocacy. Remember, this was something that she did out of the volition of her heart. It was not something that she was paid to do. And how did she end up communicating her brand? So what she did was, of course, she would go on the streets, she would advertise, she would go on the news and really share about how important it is for her to be able to save and her commitment to the environment. Okay. And again, when you take a look at that, it wasn't actually she saying that, you know, this should be my brand. But what she did was she identified her brand and she built towards, she did things that would help her build towards that brand. Okay. So I want to ask you a question. Okay. When people at work describe you, what are you most known for? Okay, so we're going to launch a poll at this time, and you can only answer once. Okay, so number one, are you the type of person, or are you known for getting things done efficiently? Are you known for being reliable and supportive? Are you known for providing ideas and insights? Are you known? Are you the type of person you handle difficult situations well? Kaya you're the go-to person when crisis happens. And maybe you're not sure how others see you in the organization. Okay, so again, please answer the poll. It's anonymous anyway, so we'd love to see your participation in that. And, you know, this is just something for us to assess ourselves now. Okay, so we have almost half of our participants have answered. Okay. And okay, we're now going to end the poll and let's now share what the results are. Okay, so I'll ask, there you go. And we see a total of 49% said being reliable and supportive. We have 7 people that have also shared that handling difficult situations well, not sure how others see you. And 4 said, oh, I'm known for getting things done efficiently. Okay. And so without actually saying much, you already have a brand. People already are talking about you when you're not in the room, and there are adjectives or certain phrases that are attached already to your name. Okay. And simply because a personal brand means to say it is your reputation. Okay. And your reputation does not just come out because it is shaped by your actions, how you communicate, and the value that you bring into any relationship that you have. Now, when I want to develop this personal brand, I will now call it personal branding. Why? Because at the end of the day, this is you proactively and intentionally shaping how you want others to perceive you, so that you will now showcase the unique value, your expertise, and your personality aligned to how you want them to see you in a consistent manner. In other words, when I show up in a certain way, in one instance or one situation, that's not building my personal brand, but it is built through time. It is built through several interactions consistently. Okay? So I want you to ask yourself the questions, what do you stand for? Okay? Meaning to say, what values do you show in the relationships that you carry? Right? Do you value truth? Do you value people? No, do you value relationships? Do you value integrity? So what is it that you stand for? Okay. Second question is, what value do you bring to the business? In other words, when you're absent at work, do people look for you in such a way that they will not be able to function because it's only you that brings that unique contribution to work? Okay. And then last is, how do people experience you when they have that moment with you, right? Do they end up feeling better than before they entered that conversation with you? Okay. So these are 3 things I want you to really think about and probably be honest with yourself on it. Okay. So I'd like to share you a little bit about my personal journey on how I built my personal brand. Okay. So I am very clear. Many years ago, I've crafted my personal purpose statement, which was developing people towards personal excellence. So this is another webinar topic, training altogether, wherein, you end up crafting your purpose statement. So I was very clear with this, that I was created by God for me to be able to really develop people towards personal excellence. Out of this purpose statement, I realized that the personal brand I want to develop is that of being a growth architect. Okay. So what does that mean? How will that look like if I was actually living my life as a growth architect? Okay. So first of all, before I even share with you how that came about, I'm going to talk to you about the steps that I took in order for me to be able to develop my personal brand. Okay. So first of all, if you take a look at this, it all starts with shaping your perception of value. In other words, how people experience and describe you. So that's the one that you see at the bottom. Okay. So many years ago, I used to work in New York City. I was hired as a sales assistant by one of the fashion companies there. My goal at that time was to be able to later on become a sales manager and eventually, of course, be a brand ambassador, okay, in our organization. When I was hired as a sales assistant, I knew that I had more talent that was out there, that was in me, that I could contribute. Because as a sales assistant, I actually was in charge of all of the clerical things, making sure that my boss's coffee was ready in the morning. I was in charge of doing setting his appointments, delivering proposals to different clients. Okay, I knew that I could do way more than that. And so what I did was, number one, because I was very clear with the kind of position I wanted to have. I was very clear with my ambition, and that ambition was to become a sales manager. And so what I did, the first thing I did was, on my first day at work, I went to Macy's. I don't know if you're familiar with Macy's. I went to Macy's and I invested in a suit. And I said to myself, I want to be able to dress for the position I want, not the position I had. And so every day, I was the only sales assistant that would come to work in a suit. And then the next thing that I did was I started to study the job description of the sales managers, which was, of course, my boss, right? So I would see that he would not just prepare the proposals, but he would go out there, talk to clients, and of course, talk about the products that we sold. And so my boss at that time, he would be out visiting the other offices that we had in the different parts of the world. So 60% of the time, I was the one left in the New York office. So instead of waiting for him to give me my marching orders and tell me what to do, I knew for a fact that I had the ability to talk about the products we sold. I had the ability to develop relationships with the people we worked with. And so instead of just dropping the proposals, what I did was I actually set up appointments with our clients and met with them personally and developed the relationships. Now, what happened was my boss started to have a different experience of me. In other words, I was shaping the perception of the value that I brought. And the reason is because every time he would go overseas, the business would escalate 70 to 80% because I would end up now sharing and bringing out those skills of selling, of interpersonal relationship, of talking to the people that he was supposed to be the one to meet. So in other words, I went out of my job description because I knew that I could give more value to the organization. After I was able to shape the perception and value of my boss and the other leaders of the organization, remember, we were an organization of 30,000 people. So I did not just want to be an employee number. I wanted the VPs of our Los Angeles office, which was where our headquarters are, to, of course, know my name. Okay? So because of that, my boss was so proud of me, he would end up talking about me in the meetings. One day, I got a call from the vice president of the company. He was based in Los Angeles at that time. And what happened was he called me and he said, "Oh, Karen, your boss is not here. I will fly you out for a very important meeting that we are going to be having in Canada. So I want you to pack your bags. In 3 days, you're leaving and you're going to represent the company." So the next step is, because the perception of my value became different, I was able to now gain the trust and I was able to influence the people in the organization to now see me as not just an assistant, but actually as somebody that could represent them very well, even if it was not a role even if it was not a position I played, I now played the role of a leader. So people started to listen to me. They started to involve me in decisions, in meetings, and I became a reliable person at that matter. What happened also was I was able to tell my boss and influence him when he would print for them to print out my business card without the job title. Because I told him, I said, "Boss, if you put my job title as a sales assistant, these clients will not want to meet me. They will want to meet you, right? So I said, leave out my job description, and he actually did. The last part, because I was able to now build the trust and influence, it now started to create opportunities for me. There were certain things that I asked him, like one of the dreams that I had was actually to have a corner office that would overlook Bryant Park. They were able to give that to me. Lo and behold, in 5 years' time, I was promoted and I was chosen to take the place of my boss when he finally retired. And so the importance of personal branding is there. I want all of you to know that you have the ability to shape the brand that you want to have so that people perceive you in a different way. Now, in this book, The Brand Called You, it says here, all of us need to understand the importance of branding. Remember, you are the CEO of your own company, and that company's name is Me Incorporated. According to Tom Peters, he said, our most important job is to be the head marketer of the brand called you. Okay, so how can we now build our brand? Okay, so the first step is competence. I want you to take a look at your competence. What does this look like? Think about what you are an expert on. Okay, what are your capabilities? So again, you cannot be jack of all trades, master of none. You need to find something that you are good at, and you want to be able to master yourself in such a way that you become an expert and a go-to person on that. Okay? So these are your skills, expertise, and your ability to be able to deliver results. So I want you to ask yourself the following questions. What are you known for doing well? No? What do you consistently deliver quality work and not work that goes back to you because, again, there's something missing? And then do people rely on your capability? No? Do they ask you for help, or are you the go-to person on a certain, what do you call this, skill, right? Because remember, if you are not competent, you will not be able to build credibility in the workplace. Okay? So for me personally, how do I continuously hone my competence in the field I have chosen now, which is of training and development? Okay? If I want to be known as a growth architect, I need to personally grow myself. Okay? And how do I do that? Every year, I have what I call an education fund. Okay? I make sure that I set aside a certain amount for me to be able to develop the skills that I have consistently. Okay? We know for a fact that life is like an escalator. It's either you are going up or you're going down. And the reason is because life moves forward. Right now, AI is already in our world. We never knew for a fact that, it can even replace a lot of the things or jobs that we have right now. But the good news is we have the ability to upskill ourselves so that we are always relevant in our workplace. We are always relevant in the industry and the field that we have chosen. Okay, so these are some of the different trainings, the different certifications, and the different educational attainments that I've had through the years. So again, last year, I became a culture invigoration consultant. This year naman, I have a new certification that I'm gunning for on May, which is focused on psychological safety. Okay, so as a growth architect, of course, I don't just limit myself into studying new things in the education aspect, but every time I also travel, I also want to be able to learn new things. Okay, so this was in a recent trip I had in Korea. And I'm always an advocate for not just shopping and not just eating, but I want the experience also to be something that I want to learn, something new I want to learn. Okay, so in that case, what I did was I learned how to make perfume. Right? I learned what it was to mix the different notes. And then, of course, I came about with a finished product. right? So again, it's consistently living that brand. It's consistently what you call this finding opportunities to be able to develop yourself. Okay. So number one is you want to be able to grow your competence. The second thing is you also want to be able to align it with the right character. Okay. In other words, how are you building trust with the people around you? This is your integrity, your consistency, and your professionalism. No? So when there are projects, when there are things that are asked of you, do you follow through? Right? Do you have accountability? Right? Are you fair when you make decisions? Especially if you are in HR, very important is, of course, people see you as somebody that they can rely and trust, right? That they can share certain grievances, or when you make policies in the office, that you are looking at all of the different what you call the situations of the different employees you have, no? And lastly, this is very important, no? Because remember, your character is tested when you show up under pressure. Remember, your character is nice. It's easy to have a good character when things are going well. But how do you end up showing up when things don't go well, right? Because remember, when you build that character, if you build it right, you build trust. If you don't, there is no trust. Okay? Let me give you an example of how character can be built the right way and the wrong way. Okay. So the first sample I have you is of Elizabeth Holmes. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in 2003, Elizabeth Holmes founded Theranos. Okay, so Theranos became a very, very big buzz brand because it promised to revolutionize healthcare with a device called the Edison. And what this device did was it's supposed to actually run hundreds of blood tests using just a tiny drop of blood from a finger prick. Okay? She positioned herself as a visionary inspired by Steve Jobs, and the idea was massively appealing. So people, she was actually featured in so many talk shows and wanted to find out who is this person that is revolutionizing the healthcare. However, there was something that happened. The technology never worked as promised. Tests often were inaccurate or performed on traditional machines and not the Edison. So the internal employees in Theranos and whistleblowers now raised serious ethical concerns, and the company misled investors, the regulators, and the public about the capabilities and the test results. So after more or less 12 years, in 2015 and 16, they were investigated. The company now unraveled, and Holmes and the COO were charged with fraud. Okay. And so what happened was, this was now her inauthentic branding. Why? Because there was control over truth. Her image, what do you call this? She was able to look into her image over the integrity in aligning it in a consistent manner. And at the end of the day, her success was short-term. Okay? So this is what you call your inauthentic branding. No, you're faking it, right? However, there is also one person which I believe has a very authentic branding, and that's none other than Mayor Vico Soto. Okay? So we know for a fact that he has led with transparency and integrity throughout the years. Okay? He has walked the talk. He is focused on people and not on publicity. And when he uses communication, it's very direct in a very simple manner because he knows who his audience is. And through the years has demonstrated competence and results. Okay? So these are two different ways on how you can brand yourself. Either you want to brand yourself in an inauthentic manner, but there is a right way to do that, and that is through authenticity by showing and living your brand in a consistent and right way. Okay. And the last one, so now you have your competence, and then what do you call this? Your character. And last but not the least, you want to be able to build your brand through connection. Because you will never be able to build the brand if you don't build genuine connections. And that is how you develop influence, right? So think about this for a moment in your workplace, okay? Wherever you are right now, do the people around you feel heard and respected? When they come to you with issues, when they come to you with concerns, right? Do you drop everything? Do you drop your phone? Really fully listen to them? Do you acknowledge the emotions that they share with you, right? Do they feel respected in such a way that when they share, even important and uh, private information, do you make sure that you do not share it with others? In other words, are you trustworthy, right? Second is, I want you to think about if you're approachable, right? When people reach out to you through text, through DM, right? Through the phone and ask for time with you, no? Are you easily able to give them time? Right? Even probably walking through the cafeteria or probably in the hallways, right? Do you acknowledge or even give them a smile, even if you don't know them by name? Okay. And then last is, are you there to collaborate effectively? No, collaboration means to say, I have an open mind to listen to what your ideas are, right? Let's work this out together. Let's find solutions that will benefit not just our department or not just me and my role, but actually both of us, all of us, including, of course, the organization. Because remember, without your influence, without connection, you will not be able to influence people around you. Okay? So these are the three pillars of your personal brand. So you have your competence, it's what you deliver. Your character is how you show up every day. And your connection, how you relate to people. So the question now is, which of these three is your strongest today? Okay. And what do you need to strengthen? So in the chat box, quickly, again, what do you think are some areas that you believe you are strong at today? So type that in the chat box. Is it character? Is it competence? Or is it connection? Okay, so we'll wait for some of your answers there on the chat box. Is it character, competence, or connection? Again, which of the three is your strongest today? Okay. Thank you, Patricia. You said character, competence. And then Chona says character. Chireen says strongest is character. And then I want to strengthen my competence. Okay. Good. I see your answers also. Andrea, Alana, Faye, Jeza, Ella. Okay. And so it's important every day, ask yourself the question, what is it that I need to build today? No, what is it that I feel that is important? And what is it that I am strongest at the moment? Okay. And so now, because of that, you are now ready to craft your branding statement. Okay. So the formula for crafting your brand statement, because again, it's important that if you want to build your brand, you need to be able to know what your personal brand is. Okay. So here is a quick formula that you can use. I help. Who are you helping now? In other words, your brand should be targeted to a particular set of people. And then what do you want to achieve? What do you want to help them achieve? And then how are you now going to do it? Okay. So examples of that are the following. I help leaders build high-performing teams by strengthening communication and culture. Okay. Another example is I help organizations grow by developing people and creating engaging workplaces. So I'll give you just a quick 2 minutes for you to be able to, again, you can take a screenshot of this if you need more time to think about what is my brand statement? no? And then again, clarity of that brand statement will now help you develop your character, your competence, and your connection. And then later on, I will teach you how to show and communicate your personal brand. So I'll give you 2 minutes quickly for you to just start to craft your brand statement. Okay, so I hope some of you had a good start in crafting your brand statement. Again, think about it as a draft, and then probably after the webinar today, you'll be able to sit down a little bit more and think about this in an in-depth manner. Okay, so now that you've crafted your personal brand statement, you are now ready to communicate your personal brand. Okay. So 3 ways on how you can communicate your personal brand. First is, of course, through the conversations that you have. Okay. Remember, how you communicate is how people perceive your value. Okay. One way for you to be able to show that is through meetings. Okay. So the question is, how often do you actively share ideas or insights? Because remember, if people don't hear your thinking, they will not be able to recognize your value. So I always tell this in my workshops that every time before you go to a meeting, prepare particular answers or insights that you might want to be able to share so that you're not just a passive attendee, but rather people start to hear your voice and you'll be able to show the value that you bring through those ideas. Okay. So here are a few tips when you are communicating your in conversations. First is, of course, you want to be able to be clear with your thoughts and you want to also be intentional. So in other words, think about what is it that I want this person to get out of this conversation, right? What do I want to achieve through this conversation, right? And then when you are having those conversations, you want to be able to connect their work towards bigger goals also, no? Because at the end of the day, when you are connecting a person's work, when you're talking to them to bigger goals, it will now help them feel seen, valued, and heard. That if, example, if you're in HR, that you're not just a policy maker, but you actually are there for their welfare. You're there for their growth. No, you want to be able to offer ideas and not just updates. And last is you want to be able to communicate in a way that you are confident, right? Assertive, but not aggressive. Okay. So first is through your conversations. That's how you communicate your brand. Second is your behavior, right? Your actions every day, how you show up, especially again, as we mentioned a while ago, when things are not going right. No, how do you show up? Okay. So when something goes wrong at work, what is the first instinct? Do you fix the problem immediately? Do you stop and analyze what happened first? Do you explain or come to defend your side? Or do you feel unsure or overwhelmed? Okay. So again, what you'd like is, of course, when things don't really go well, you want to be able to pause first and analyze what happened. Okay. Few things. What are some of the weak behaviors when you're communicating with your brand? Okay, so the blaming game, you avoid accountability, emotional reaction, or you withdraw or shut down. Okay, but what you want to do is to exhibit now what you call your strong brand behavior, such as you want to be able to take ownership, right, for the projects, for the responsibilities you have. When things don't go well, you want to be able to manage those emotions, stay calm and composed. And of course, you want to respond thoughtfully as well as focus on solutions and not just the problem. Okay? So when you are exhibiting these weak behaviors, you signal now unreliable, you're difficult to work with. Okay? However, when I start to exhibit these strong brand behaviors, I now end up signaling emotional intelligence. Okay? So here's a power move I want to teach you. Every time before something happens, before you react, you want to respond by pausing, thinking about what just happened, about the situation, so that you can respond and not react. Okay? And then the last one is your contribution. Right? This is a very important way for you to express your personal brand, because what you consistently bring to the table defines your value. So again, let me show you some samples. A typical contribution. What is that? I'll just share the updates. I will complete my assigned work. I'll just wait for directions. In other words, I am very, what do you call this? I am just reacting, right? However, you want to be able to build that strong personal brand by I will now start to bring insights and not just updates. I will start to suggest improvements, okay? And not just probably complete what is assigned of me. I will now also connect my work to the results that I would like to achieve. And I don't want to be passive, but I am now there to think about what are the other needs that are attached to this particular situation, no? To my role, right? To my responsibilities. Because again, if you are just typically contributing, it signals that you're reactive, you are replaceable, right? If you want to be able to signal a strong brand using these, you now signal that you are a proactive contributor, okay? And then of course, last but not the least, remember your brand, your online presence precedes you. Even before people experience you, what happens is they've already looked you up, right? I currently coach a lot of people, a lot of individuals that actually have lost their jobs, no, through redundation, and whatever company reorganization, no? And that's the effect. And I always tell them, you need to be able to not just be good in terms of your CV, but actually it now includes your online presence. Okay? Kasi it's different when before they speak to you or they experience you, a lot of times people look you up na. Okay? So you want to also build your brand online. And there's 3 things that, again, number 1 is you want to be very clear. What do you want to be known for? No? Think about that. Again, your brand statement will be able to help you with that. Consistency, meaning to say, with all of your online platforms, how often and how aligned is your content to the brand that you want to reflect? And last but not the least, how often do people see and engage with you? Now, so here is just an example of how that looks like with me. I am very clear with the brand that I want to exude, which is that of a growth architect. It's seen in my LinkedIn account and consistently in how I interact on social media. Okay? So I want to leave you now with this. Remember, in communicating your brand is not built in presentations or titles. It is built in everyday moments by what you say, how you act, and what you contribute. And last but not the least, my final call to action is starting tomorrow or maybe today. Pick one small action to strengthen each area. Is it either sharpening your skills, standing by your values, or deepening a relationship that you have at work? Because remember, your personal brand isn't built in a day, it is built every day. Okay, and with that, Pao, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Miss Karen. We really appreciate the insights that you shared in terms of improving our personal branding. I really align with that saying that the contribution really brings value into your personal brand. At this point, we're going to open up the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to post it in the chat. Or you can unmute yourselves and then you can say your questions from there. For now, we had some questions that came in. I'm just going to read them out loud. So the first one points to the culture of the Philippines, that it's a little bit more hierarchical. We've noticed that, or they've noticed that there's situations where employees are being scolded by bosses when they move ahead. So the question here is, what would you advise, Ms. Karen, considering that in the Philippines, there are situations where it's not really about skill, but it's more about environment?
Okay. First thing is, I want you to focus on what you can control, right? Because I cannot look and change the culture if it does not start with me. So the question is, what am I able to control? I can control my behavior. I can control the way I show up. I can control the way I contribute. I can control the way I communicate with the people around me, right? So the intention is, first of all, to be able to change, to be able to make a difference and create that impact in the area of influence that I have. Because remember, when you start with the things that you control, that you can control, you end up now expanding your area of influence, right? People will look to you as somebody that it doesn't matter. If bosses are shouting left and right, you're not going to be that kind of a boss, right? If what do you call this? In the world, it's probably male dominated pa rin yung mga na-promote, okay? Oo, di ba? But it's okay because I can always make people in my organization feel valued even if there's no promotion for them, right? So again, the answer is focus on things you can control because that is what's going to shape your personal brand.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Ms. Karen. We have another question that came in more on the contribution. I'm bringing value. It's really more on how can we make sure that our contributions are being seen if it's not something that the organization is currently looking for?
Okay. Well, you know how to add value. You also need to be able to align with what is needed. Kasi you don't want to be contributing to something that is not going to help the organization, right? So if you're saying it's not what they're looking for, then they will not be able to really see the value. So I remember clearly when I was working as a sales assistant, my goal was to make my boss look good, and my goal was to make our business grow. And so I was very intentional with, based on my skills, talents, and abilities, what is going to align to the organization's vision, to the targets that we had in our department, and what can I contribute towards that? Because that's the only way they will be able to see the value, is if you are aligning to what is needed. Okay? Maybe the second way to do it is probably you can be there to create the need. right? So for instance, if maybe your bosses don't see that people are already burned out in the organization, right? And there is no real need for wellness programs, maybe you can initiate that by putting that out there and recommending it to your boss in such a way that giving a little bit of context. I'm experiencing, this is what's happening. People are not motivated. They're not contributing anymore the way they used to. What I'd like to do is volunteer to have, example, a Zumba session every Thursday afternoon, right? So in that way, you're contributing, but later on, even if it's something that they don't need now, later on, they see the value of what that contribution brings. Okay, so number one, again, to summarize, align it with the current needs of the organization. And number two is maybe you want to be able to bring out that need so that you are able to contribute towards that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Karen. We have another one that came in. But before I read this out loud, I'd like to open up the chat again. To anybody who has any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and ask your questions. So going back to the question that was sent over, based on what you've shared, what are the top action points that we can keep in mind in order for us to strengthen our personal brand?
So I gave 3 points. Right? Those are your 3 action points. Just stick to that first. I don't want to overwhelm you, but you want to be able to, again, think about it. You want to be able to start with building your personal brand through your character, remember? So think about that. What values do you hold true, right? How do you end up showing up when times are difficult? What do you want people to say about you? Are you helpful at work, right? Are you composed at work? Again, remember, that's your integrity, your professionalism when you show up. No, you want to be able to, again, work towards your competence, meaning to say you are consistently developing yourself. You're consistently becoming a better version of yourself. Why? Because that's the only way you can add value. So you don't want same old, right? I always tell people in the workshops that, every year I want you to update your CV. And if there is nothing that you have added or can add in your CV, it means to say that your competence is not being developed. Okay. And then of course, lastly, it's really your connection. No, you will not be able to build a strong brand, a strong, genuine brand, if you do not develop meaningful relationships in the workplace, right? Because work is personal. It is part of your life. It is not what do you call this, set apart from your life. It is part of your life. In fact, a lot of my very good friends now are the people I've worked with before. When I started my consulting business, my first and second the person that actually was my client were the people I worked with before, right? Because I've developed those meaningful relationships in the past. When I started to become a consultant, a trainer, right? And they knew how I work. They understood, I was able to build my brand while I was working with them. They were now able to trust me and say, oh, Karen, I'll refer you to my brother, or I'm working in this company now. I want you to start training them, right? So again, those meaningful relationships is key for you to be able to build your.
Thank you so much, Ms. Karen. We actually have a few more, but we only have time for one more question. For the rest of them, we're going to compile the rest of your questions, and then we'll share them with Ms. Karen so that she can answer them, and then share them with everybody after. But for our last question, somebody asked, what are the immediate observable indications that tell us that we are strengthening our personal brand?
Okay, so immediate. Okay, so your personal brand will always be attached to a goal that you have, right? So, example, in my case, when I was working in New York, my goal was for me to be able to get that promotion in 3 years. Actually, I got promoted in 3 years. What I was very clear also, what was that position that I wanted to have, right? And how do I know that I was developing it? Because how do I know that I was gaining ground? Remember, I talked about why it's important. Number one is I started to see that my value was being seen in the organization, right? I started to see people trusting me more. No, my suggestions became very influential, right? My requests were granted simply because I was able to now develop and shape the perception of my value. And last is, it now started to create opportunities for me. Now, simply because I know that I was building my brand right, I was clear and intentional with my actions and how I was building it.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Miss Karen. And on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for your time this afternoon and sharing your insights and the importance of building personal branding in improving our careers. I'd also like to thank everybody who took the time this afternoon to join us in our webinar. Again, this is the second out of 20 webinars that we are conducting this year and in celebration for our 20th anniversary. Before you go, we're going to be launching a poll. This is really more to help us improve on our webinars as we conduct these in the future. So we'll launch the poll in a minute. Great, there we go. So if you guys could take just a few minutes to give us your feedback, that would be really appreciated. Thank you. We're also going to be sending over our webinar calendar in the chat. And then you can also look out for these on social media. All right. On that note, thank you again, everybody, for taking the time this afternoon to go through the webinar with us. And we look forward to having you again in our future webinars. Thank you.